My mother kept a small green ledger locked in the bottom drawer of her desk for over 30 years, and she made me promise I would never open it until she was gone. I didn't understand what she meant by that until the day a 61-year-old woman named Nora Whitmore sat down across from me, applying for a job cleaning the floors of the very building my family built. I recognized her name before I recognized her face. It was written in my mother's handwriting on the inside cover of that ledger, next to 3 words I had read 100 times without understanding. She was right. I run the company my grandmother founded. I had never heard of Nora Whitmore in my life, not from my mother, not from anyone, but something about the way she folded her hands in her lap, the way she looked at the floor like a woman who had long since stopped expecting kindness from a waiting room, told me this was not a coincidence. It was the beginning of something my family had spent 3 decades trying to bury. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. My name is Diane Ashford. I run Ashford Textiles, the company my grandmother, Eleanor Ashford, built from a single sewing floor in Hartford, Connecticut, into a business that now employs over 2,000 people. My mother, Margaret, ran it after her until she passed 2 years ago and left it to me, along with a house full of things I still hadn't finished going through. Nora Whitmore was applying for a facilities position, the kind of job most people walk past without a second look. But her application told a story that didn't add up. A woman who had studied accounting in the late 1980s, who had every mark of intelligence and discipline on paper, and who had spent the following 30 years moving between cleaning jobs and warehouse shifts, never once returning to the field she had trained for. I wanted to know why a woman with her mind had spent 3 decades scrubbing floors. I wanted to know why my mother had written her name inside a locked ledger, and I wanted to know what my mother meant when she wrote that Nora Whitmore had been right. Right about what, and right about whom. Nora Whitmore grew up in a modest house on the edge of Hartford, the oldest of 4 children, the first in her family to enroll in college. She was studying accounting at a community college at night, while working days as a housekeeper for my grandmother, Eleanor Ashford, at the family estate that later became our company's original headquarters. She was 19 years old. She kept a small notebook of practice ledgers in her apron pocket, working through bookkeeping exercises on her breaks, because she intended to become an accountant, and everyone who knew her back then believed she would. My grandmother liked her. My mother, who was only a few years younger than Nora, liked her more. The 2 of them became something close to friends, in the quiet, uneven way that happens between a housekeeper's daughter and the woman in the same house, who happens to be a few years older and infinitely more capable than either of them expected. My mother told me, years later, in the only conversation we ever had about this, that Nora used to help her with her own homework at the kitchen table after her shift ended, the same patient, unhurried way she explained numbers to anyone who asked. Then, in the fall of 1988, $12,000 went missing from the Ashford Family Charitable Trust, a fund my grandmother had set up to support scholarships for young women in Hartford. It was a significant sum for the time, and it disappeared over several months, moved out of the trust's ledger in small, careful amounts that were only noticed when the annual audit came due. Nora Whitmore was the one who had access to the ledger room. She was the one who balanced petty accounts for the household as part of her duties, and she was, by nearly every account I would later uncover, the only person in that house young enough, poor enough, and powerless enough for the accusation to stick without a fight. She was dismissed within a week, without a formal hearing, without the police ever filing charges, because no one wanted the scandal of a criminal case attached to the Ashford name. But word travels in a small industry, and word travels faster in a small city. Her scholarship was quietly withdrawn. The accounting firm that had promised her an internship stopped returning her calls. By the following spring, Nora Whitmore had stopped trying to explain herself to people who had already decided what she was, and she took the first job that didn't ask questions about her past. She never went back to school. She never went back to numbers, not professionally, not until the day she stood in the doorway of a conference room on the 4th floor of a building she used to clean. Nora started the following Monday, 3 weeks after I hired her, over the objections of our head of facilities, a man named Warren Coates, who felt her qualifications were, in his words, unusual for a custodial position. Warren had run our estate operations for 11 years and believed, with the quiet certainty of a man who had never been questioned, that his authority extended to deciding who deserved to be spoken to with respect and who did not. Within her first 2 weeks, Warren had corrected Nora in front of other employees for work that did not need correcting. He raised his voice at her near the elevators over a smudge on a window that had, in fact, already been cleaned. Nora never argued. She listened, nodded, and returned to her work, the way water moves around a stone rather than through it. I watched one of these exchanges myself from across the lobby, and I filed it away, the way you file away something you know you will eventually have to address. The real crisis came on a Thursday in March, 6 weeks after Nora started. Our finance team was digitizing 3 decades of handwritten trust ledgers ahead of a planned merger between the Ashford Family Trust and a larger regional foundation, a deal worth several $1 million that depended on our historical accounts reconciling cleanly. They did not reconcile. A discrepancy from 1988, the same year Nora had been dismissed, refused to balance, no matter how many analysts our controller, a sharp and normally unshakable man named Marcus Webb, put on the problem. By 11 that morning, the deal's lead attorney was threatening to pause the merger over what she called an unexplained historical liability. The old ledgers used a hand-entered double-column system that predated our current software by decades, and none of our current staff had ever been trained to read it. Nora was cleaning the hallway outside the boardroom, part of her regular rotation, when she stopped in the open doorway and looked at the projected image of the old ledger page on the screen. She did not say anything at first. She simply stood there, reading it the way you read something you have not seen in 30 years, but have never entirely forgotten. I was standing near the back of the room. I saw her face change, and I gave her the smallest nod I could manage. She set down her cart, walked to the whiteboard, and began writing, translating the old double-column entries into the modern format, line by line, without hesitation, the way a person writes something they have carried in their memory far longer than they ever admitted to anyone. When she finished, she stepped back and said quietly that the 1988 discrepancy hadn't started with a mistake. It had started with a transfer that was recorded under the wrong account number, deliberately, and then never corrected. The room went still. Marcus Webb stared at the board for a long moment before asking her, carefully, how she knew that account structure so precisely. Nora looked at him and said she used to keep those books herself, a long time ago, before she was told she wasn't allowed to anymore. Within an hour, Nora's read of the ledger had allowed our analysts to isolate the exact account the missing funds had been rerouted through in 1988, a private disbursement account that, at the time, only 3 people had authority to access: my grandmother, our longtime family attorney, and my mother's older brother, my uncle Richard Ashford, who at 26 had just taken his first management role inside the family trust. Word of what Nora had done moved through the building the way it always does in a company that size, and by the end of the day, Warren Coates was standing in my office, insisting that an hourly custodial employee had no business engaging with confidential trust documents, regardless of the outcome. He used the word liability twice. He did not once mention that she had been right. I told him I would look into it, in the tone that ends a conversation, and 2 days later, after reviewing the full record of how he had treated her, I let him go. That decision was mine, and it should have come sooner. But the deeper question sat with me the way it must have sat with my mother for 30 years. If Richard had access to that account, and if the transfer had been deliberately misfiled rather than simply lost, then someone in 1988 had known exactly what happened to that money, and it was not the 19-year-old housekeeper who took the blame for it. That night, I finally opened the green ledger my mother had left me. Most of the pages were ordinary household accounts in her handwriting, but tucked into the back cover was a folded letter, dated 1989, addressed to Nora Whitmore and never sent. In it, my mother wrote that she had seen Richard remove cash from the disbursement account herself, more than once, and that she had told our grandmother what she saw. She wrote that our grandmother had asked her never to repeat it because a scandal involving her son would end the family's standing in Hartford, and that a scandal involving a housekeeper's daughter would not. My mother was 22 years old when she wrote that letter. She never sent it. Instead, she kept a small, private accounting of her own for the rest of her life, sending Nora anonymous cashier's checks twice a year for 2 decades, never explaining why, never signing her name, carrying a debt she never found the courage to settle honestly while she was alive. I brought the letter to Nora myself, at the small apartment she rented on the east side of Hartford, the kind of building where the buzzer panel has more blank slots than names. She read it standing in her doorway, and for the first time since I had met her, her composure broke, just slightly, just enough for me to see how long she had been holding it together for other people's comfort rather than her own. She told me she had always known Richard was the one who moved the money. She had seen the transfer herself the week before she was dismissed, and she had told my grandmother exactly what she found. My grandmother had thanked her for her diligence, and then fired her 3 days later for the very discrepancy she had reported. Nora said she spent years wondering whether anyone had believed her, or whether she had simply been convenient to blame. My mother's letter answered that question 30 years too late. Richard Ashford was, by then, the chairman of our board and the public face of the very merger the old discrepancy had jeopardized. I confronted him privately, with the letter and with Nora's original account laid out between us. He denied it first, the way people who have had 30 years to prepare an answer usually do, calmly and without hesitation. But my mother's letter, combined with the ledger evidence Nora had helped surface, was specific enough that denial no longer held. He eventually admitted he had used the trust to cover a series of gambling debts as a young man, and that our grandmother had chosen to protect the family name over a teenage employee's reputation, a decision he had allowed to stand, unchallenged, for 3 decades. I removed Richard from the board the following week, with the full support of the trustees. Once the documentation was presented, I could not undo 30 years of Nora Whitmore's life, the scholarship she lost, the internship that never happened, the decades spent in work that never touched what she was actually capable of. But I could tell the truth publicly, and I did, in a statement to our staff, and later to the regional press, naming what had happened in 1988, and correcting the record with her name attached to the correction, rather than the accusation. I offered Nora a formal position overseeing financial training for our internal teams, at a salary that reflected what she should have been earning for the last 30 years, not what she had been forced to accept. She did not take it right away. She told me she needed time to decide what it meant to return to a version of herself she had put away a long time ago, not out of choice, but out of survival. I told her she could have as much time as she needed, because for once, someone finally would. She accepted 3 weeks later. On her first morning back, She stood in front of a whiteboard on the third floor, in a room that had been used for storage for years, and wrote a single line of figures at the top. Not a solution yet, just a beginning. The way you write the first line of something you intend to finish properly this time. I think about my mother's unsent letter more than I expected to. I think about how long silence can sit inside a family, waiting for someone willing enough to open the drawer it was locked in. I wonder how many other families are keeping a version of that same green ledger somewhere, unopened, and what it might cost them, and everyone around them, to finally read it. If you were in Diane's position, would you have opened that ledger the moment you found it? Or would some part of you have been afraid of what it would cost your family to know the truth? Tell me in the comments what stayed with you most from Nora's story, and if you believe silence can be its own kind of betrayal, even when it's meant to protect someone. If this story moved you, there's another one waiting for you next, about a family with a different kind of locked drawer, and a truth that took even longer to surface. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss it when it goes live.